Kicking off at number 5, The Exorcist. And what a film it is! Widely heralded as the most accurate cinematic depiction of demonic possession, The Exorcist, directed by William Friedkin, took the cinematic world by storm during the early 70s, so much so that some cinemas provided Exorcist bath bags for certain viewers that found the film too much to handle. Roger Ebert, a critic of critical acclaim, believed that the special effects were so unusually graphic that he slated for the film to be rated X rather than its R rating on release. He gave it a 4 out of 4 star review though, describing it as a raw and painful experience. That's exactly what it is. The Exorcist is a story about Regan, a 12-year-old girl played by the incredible Linda Blair. Long story short, she's possessed by Pazuzu, an ancient demon who exploits and perverses the girl into a bizarre, twisted version of a human. In essence, that's the crux of the film, body horror, and Lancaster Merrin, a veteran Catholic priest who tries to save the poor girl's soul. It's a demonstration of twisted body horror, incredibly appropriate special effects, and a simple plot that gnaws at that dark, hidden place in your soul. Coming in at number 4, Wreck. Please, 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 please watch the 2007 original Spanish version of this film and not the atrocious US remake. Seriously, please watch this film and just forget about the other one. This is a tried and tested process. If you watch this film alone on Halloween, you will be completely and utterly terrified. In fact, even if you watch this film with a group of friends in the middle of the day, you'll still be completely and utterly terrified. Widely slated as the one handheld found footage modern horror film that actually got it right, Wreck is a Spanish horror co-written and directed by Jaime Balaguero and Paco Plaza. I don't want to spoil a lot for you because going into this film with a fresh set of eyes is the best way to approach it. Let me put it this way though, the last 5 minutes of this film are some of the most suspenseful moments in recent cinematic history. Yeah, the film itself kind of leaves a lot open to interpretation, playing a bit loose and fast with horror tropes, and the wider franchise that it spawned was unremarkable at best. But if you're up for a scare this Halloween, then Wreck is your best bet. Next up at number 3, Hellraiser.
We'll tear your soul apart.
We'll tear your soul apart. Need I say more? One of the most chillingly iconic lines in the glorious era of the 80s horror era. Clive Barker is a colossal visionary of horror, and his small budget lo-fi horror masterpiece has spawned 30 years worth of cult following. The less you know about this film the better really, and admittedly it's not for everyone, but its true genius lies in believably haunted character design and one of the most iconically demonic villains of all time. In my opinion, Pinhead. Oh Pinhead, you scary, scary boy. This guy haunted my nightmares as a young fledgling horror fan, not only because of his incredibly vivid design, but because he was the first modern, quiet, unpredictable villain. He wasn't really a villain either, but more of a force of nature. He was the definition of the unknown and unrelenting Cenobites. Take it from me, if you ever find yourself with a weird antique puzzle box, don't solve it, just leave it well alone. Coming in at our number 2 spot, The Thing.
Clear!
If you've seen our recent run of Halloween-based videos, then you'll know just how much of a John Carpenter fan I am. The Thing isn't just one of the best horror films ever made, it's one of the best films ever made. You could purely listen to the soundtrack of this film and still be filled with an eerie, overwhelming sense of dread. The Thing is a film that is more than the sum of its parts and demonstrates itself as the greatest creature feature of all time. Why? Simply because unlike the Xenomorph of the Alien franchise or the straightforward narrative of Jaws, we still know absolutely nothing about the Thing, the titular creature of John Carpenter's masterpiece. It's the fear of the unknown. Crazy then that on its release in 1982, it was described as instant junk, a wretched excess, and even proposed as the most hated film of all time. But obviously they were so wrong, because The Thing has spawned a cult following spanning nearly 40 years, and I can think of no better film to watch on Halloween than this one. Maybe except for one, that is. Coming in at our number 1 spot, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah, bear with me. Admittedly, The Thing is a better film all in all. On Halloween in particular, nothing will shred your nerves and get your heart racing better than Tobe Hooper's 1974 slasher masterpiece, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh my. You like this, Dave?
Why? Well, as you can see from the infamous dinner scene, which is probably on the tamer side of the film's iconic reel, this film is a complete and utter emotional ordeal. It's hard to watch and still holds up to this day as one of the most unnerving cinematic experiences out there. It's a simple equation: the South, a weird family of cannibals, a van full of teenagers, and one of the most iconic killers in horror cinema. If you don't know anything about Leatherface, then look into him, because this character is undoubtedly the stuff of nightmares, partly based on real-life serial killer Ed Gein. The success of the film as a horror masterpiece is partly down to the performance of its cast, a ramshackle bunch of relatively unknown Texan actors who managed to nail down the reality captured within this film. Because in essence, that's exactly why this film is so damn scary. It feels real. It's almost snuff-like in nature and leaves this weird, flat, disgusting feeling in the pit of your stomach. If you're looking for a film to scare the bejesus out of you this Halloween, then look no further than the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
In at 5, Peter Pumpkin Eater. The story begins with our author looking through his telescope at the moon, trying his best to be quiet because he knew his mother would be upset if she caught him up so late. Everything was normal until a low grumble was heard out in the night. He assumed it was his mother coming to check up on him, so he jumped into bed and under the covers. He heard footsteps, then another grumble. This time though, he could make out faint words. Was his mother talking to someone? The sound began to grow louder, getting closer and closer to his door. It sounded as though a large metal object was being dragged across the floorboards. He shouted out, "Mother, is that you?" But nothing. It became clear that whoever was there was singing a melody, but it was too masculine to be his mother. The noises got louder and louder. Lightning then struck, lighting up the room for a brief moment. Our author could see in the mirror opposite that he was not alone. He leapt out of his bed into the corner of the room, hiding under his teddy bears. He lifted his head, and there it was, a shadowy figure standing in the darkness. The figure then whispered in an eerie tone,
Peter, Pumpkin Eater, had a wife but couldn't keep her. He kept her in the pumpkin shell, and there he kept it very well. Peter, Pumpkin Eater, had another and didn't love her. Up the chimney he did shove her.
And that's where our creepypasta ends. In a log added later, it details how the mother and son were found dismembered inside their chimney. No details were left behind, and the killer may still be on the loose. In at 4, A Normal Halloween Night. This creepypasta documents the final time our author ever celebrated Halloween. When he was 10, there was news that a serial killer was on the loose in his area. That didn't deter him or his friends though. They got dressed up and ventured out for a night of Halloween fun. The first house they went to, an old woman answered the door. She began to panic and said, "Good costume." The kids were confused as they knew their Halloween costumes were subpar at best, but they took the candy regardless. The next house they went to, a similar incident occurred. A middle-aged man answered the door and said, "Jesus, don't scare me like that." They looked at each other confused and responded, "What do you mean?" He replied, "It's a very good costume, nothing more." He then gave them a lot of candy, but our author couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't quite right. They then went to a house at the end of the street where a crazy woman lived. Again, they scared her. "Good costume," she said. "That's the best costume I've ever seen." Our author finally broke and responded, "Whose costume?" She replied, "The guy in the serial killer costume behind you." Ugh. In at 3, My Last Halloween. Our author begins this story by describing one particular Halloween when he took his children out trick-or-treating. It was an unspoken rule that you only knock on the doors of the homes with lights on, but this particular night the eldest child wanted to knock on the door of a towering 2-story house that for the past 2 seasons had been vacant. The author had noticed a moving truck parked outside a month back, so he agreed and his children approached. They knocked, but there was no answer. After a moment or two, the door slowly creaked open and a voice beckoned. "Trick or treat." The children cheered. The father felt something was off though and approached before the voice rang out again.
I choose both.
2 hands then appeared, pulling both of the children inside. The door slammed shut and our author pounded and pounded, but there was no response. He then proceeded to kick down the door, shouting out to his children. They searched the house, but to no avail. The children were not there. It has now been a year and there has been no word. In at 2, The Masked Man. Our author in this creepypasta documents a handful of days over the Halloween period with his son James, who was adamant on dressing up as Buzz Lightyear. During the lead up to the big day, our author was preparing for his son's arrival, as he only gets special holidays following the split from his wife. On the night of October 22nd, our author details seeing a creepy man lurking around his property, almost scoping it out. He hid out of sight and peeked through the window, trying to catch a glimpse of who the masked figure was. He drew back the curtains and came face to face with the snooper, who was donning a mask similar to the one from the Scream franchise, only this time the jaw seemed to be swaying in the wind, and it had fang-like teeth. The masked man's left eye began to scan around, drifting away from where it fixated, locating our author. As it did, it disappeared. Now hopping over to October 25th, our author has a bizarre encounter with one of his neighbors that he doesn't know too well. He had placed a bowl of candy outside with a chicken scratch sign that read, "Take one." Oddly though, the sign was smeared in bloody fingerprints. He then recounts how the one and only time he had encountered his neighbor, he was looking distraught and rushing out of his house. He had said that he was late for work, which our author found odd as it was 8:30 at night. The neighbor then said he worked as a biologist at a military base and said no more. Heading into October 28th, our author has yet another encounter with the masked man. This time though it was much more sinister. Our author recalled hearing the sound of a cat screeching. He approached his window and saw the masked man, only this time its entire body. It ran like an ostrich. It was spotted with spindly hairs and blue veins, and its head appeared to be decomposing. The cat hopped a fence and the masked man followed, effortlessly leaping after it. It's now the night of the 30th. At 12:15 AM, our author hears an aggressive knock at the door. He answers. It's the neighbor, but not the creepy one, the one who lives behind him. He accuses him of scaring his wife with that creepy mask. Our author is offended that he could ever possibly think it was him, but pleased that others have been seeing the masked madman. The neighbor goes on to say, I quote, "I saw you jump clean over that fence of yours and crawl right back into your basement." Wait, what? Concerned, he opens the door to see his son just as he had left him, sleeping facing the wall. He returns to the neighbor who says, "Just stay the hell away from me and my family," before an aggressive tone takes over him and a chuckle erupts with bottomless blue eyes emerging, the same eyes he saw outside. He then says, "I gotta hand it to you though. I nearly busted out laughing when I saw you running around wearing your little kid's Buzz Lightyear costume. What the fuck?" In at 1, Trick or Treat. Now this creepypasta opens with the line, "Don't bother trying to find it. You won't find anything about the name of the town or what happened here." Yikes. I'm not sure I want to proceed, but let's proceed. The author begins by taking us back to All Hallows Eve in the old country, and how they were the first to celebrate the occasion as a holiday. He describes how the natives were confused by their behavior at this time of year, but left them alone out of fear. On this night they went out on their settlement, collecting apples and tarts. The author's little girl dressed as the Queen of England. Thank you, sir. She promised to return after sundown and not to linger too long at the households of the community. I'm getting nervous. The community was unaware of the house at the edge of the settlement until children began to enter. It was unlit and had no windows or fire to speak of, but the house seemed to be shimmering. Our author questioned it, asking other settlers about the house, but they all thought him odd, saying, "What do you mean? There's no house there. They're going to play by the stockades." He decided to venture out towards the house the children were heading towards, and what he saw through the cracks of the house unsettled him. He drew his knife, entering the home, but when he got inside he knew his knife would be useless against the forces inside. There he saw a black cloud, entering the nose and mouth of his daughter, as well as the rest of the children from the settlement. But before he could react, the black smoke entered him, and before he knew it he was outside of his body, watching on at the horrors around him. They were led back to the settlement and to the meeting hall. Parents embraced their children happily, and this is what led to the destruction of their little community. They absorbed them all. And this creepypasta is a warning to read the signs and not stray into the settlement known as Roanoke.
Number 5 on the list is the story of Stingy Jack. Now this story is actually an Irish urban legend, and it is the origin of jack-o'-lanterns. Several hundreds of years ago in Ireland there was a man named Jack who was dubbed Stingy Jack because 1, he was very stingy, but also he was very deceitful and could easily trick people into doing what he pleased. Now even though Jack was super smart and probably could have used this to make a legacy for himself, his pleasures were simple and he would spend his days drinking at the pub. One Halloween evening, Jack was drunk and walking around when he stumbled upon a body lying in the middle of the road. This turned out to be the devil, and the devil had come to collect Jack's soul. Before the devil took Jack to hell, Jack pleaded to have one more opportunity to drink ale at the pub, his last request. The devil allowed it, and the pair went to the pub and Jack enjoyed his final drink. When he was finished, he asked if the devil could pay, considering he didn't have any money. The devil didn't have any either, so Jack convinced the devil to change his appearance into a shiny coin so that they could use that, and then he would just switch back afterwards. The devil enjoyed messing with lesser beings like the bartender and decided to do what Jack suggested. He was tricked though, and Jack took his coin and put it in his pocket where he also had a crucifix. He made the devil promise not to collect his soul for 10 more years, and the devil was forced to agree. 10 years passed, and sure enough, there was the devil again waiting to collect. This time though, Jack asked if he could have an apple before he went to hell. The devil, for whatever reason, agreed and climbed a nearby tree to fetch him one. When he got to the top and looked down, crucifixes littered the ground of the tree, and the devil couldn't leave. This time, Jack made him swear to never take his soul to hell, which the devil, again, had to agree to. This was a mistake from Jack though. Several years later, the drinking caught up to him, and he died. When his soul tried to enter heaven, he was denied for being sinful his whole life. But then when it tried to enter hell, he was also denied because the devil said that he couldn't take his soul. The devil gave him one ember inside of a turnip, which acted as a makeshift lamp to guide his way through purgatory. On Halloween, some local Irish folks saw this makeshift lamp, and throughout the years, that has blossomed into the jack-o'-lanterns that we know and make today. Number 4 on this list is the story of a ghostly mother. Kevin, a teenager at the time of this incident, swears by this story and its truth. He and his friends had heard a rumor of this one turn off of a highway. It was said that many years prior, a mother and her young son at the time were driving down that highway on Halloween, and when they went to make the turn, they crashed the car and they died. Being on Halloween and being an untimely death, this sparked rumors of a haunting at the site of the crash. Kevin and his friends heard about these and decided that on Halloween they would take a drive out there and see for themselves. Now the rumor was that this mother was a friendly ghost meant to protect people from making the same error that she had. So what the boys did was they covered their car in flour to test the theory. Then, rather dangerously, they hit the gas pedal. They started rocketing down the highway, and they were gonna take this turn very unsafely. Right as they got to the turn though, Kevin lost full control of his vehicle. It wasn't responding. He and his friends immediately feared death, but to their surprise, the vehicle slowed to a very quick halt. They all got out completely blown away by what had just happened, and sure enough, on the bumper of their car was 2 handprints left in the flour that hadn't flown off. Clearly, the mother had seen what they were doing and did as the legend suggested, protecting them from dying on Halloween like her and her son had decades prior. Number 3 on this list is the murderous prediction from David Berkowitz. David, or the son of Sam as some of you may know him, is an American serial killer who went on a killing spree in 1976 and 1977. David is currently serving 6 consecutive life sentences for the crimes that he committed back then and will die in prison. The murders occurred in New York City, and David is credited with 6 of them whilst also injuring 7 other people. At the time, this case got the attention of the nation because he induced the largest New York City manhunt that the world had ever seen. He would often leave notes to the police mocking them and promising future murders. It really all was a sadistic joke to him, and he clearly loved the attention. On August 10th of 1977, the police finally found and arrested him. He was very quick to plead guilty to everything that he'd been accused of, clearly proud of his work. While he was incarcerated though, this is where the potential paranormal event comes in. What's really spooky is the prediction he made while he was in prison. David predicted that a murder would take place on Halloween to 2 people and mocked the law enforcement about it. This was chalked up as mumbo jumbo at the time, and it wasn't taken seriously. However, on Halloween morning of 1981, 2 people, Ronald and Elizabeth, were beaten and shot in their Manhattan home. This was exactly how David had predicted it, with him even laying out the exact layout of their apartment. Now, how on earth did he know that this was going to happen from the inside of a jail cell? Some people believe that the son of Sam was part of a larger cult group and that he had not acted alone during the initial murders. This could potentially lead to the explanation of how he had known about this murder. But he had also been in jail for quite some time at this point, and it seems strange that he would have known every detail about it. Either way, we can rest easy knowing that he's behind bars and hasn't made a scary prediction like that in a long time. Number 2 on this list is the story of an invited dinner guest. A newlywed husband and wife were having a dinner party for 4 other friends on Halloween. This was one of their first dinners hosted as a married couple and were very excited about it. The other guests arrived, and after some wine and chatting, they sat down for dinner. Right as they did, a knock at the door was heard. This wasn't out of the ordinary. They'd been receiving knocks all night by trick-or-treaters. So Darren, the husband of the newlyweds, went to the door to give out some candy, but when he opened the door, nobody was there. He supposed that it may have been some teenagers, maybe they were pulling a prank or something. Anyways, he went back to the dining room, he sat down, and then he noticed an extra plate had been set. No one had realized that it was there because they were all chatting and having fun, but he could have sworn that when he set that table, he only put 6 down. He guessed he must have made a mistake, and he put it away. Then some time had passed, and they decided to all head to the kitchen, and now they were gonna go serve themselves. They all did so, but when they got back, just as it was before, there was the plate and all the cutlery and the wine glass, except this time they weren't empty, but the plate was filled to the brim with food. The whole group had no idea what was happening, or if somebody was playing a trick on them, all accusing one another that they were pranking the other ones. Eventually, they decided to leave it there, thinking that it may have been a spirit of some kind. Well, as they ate, the craziest thing happened. Whenever no one was looking at that plate and everyone's eyes were averted, the food would disappear. And by the end of the evening, right as everyone was finishing, the plate and the wine glass were cleaned off. To this day, the couple has no idea what happened or how it took place. The only explanation that Darren has is that when he opened that door, he must have let a Halloween spirit into their home that wanted to stay for dinner. Number 1 on this list is the story from 3 young teenage girls. Clara, Elle, and Maddie, all 14-year-old girls, were having a sleepover with one another on Halloween. This was the first year that they decided to not go trick-or-treating and stay in. However, that doesn't mean that they didn't celebrate the spooky evening in another way. Clara had recently lost her grandfather to a long battle of cancer. She was feeling bummed out about it and suggested that they try something on Halloween. She wanted to perform a seance so that they could contact her grandfather and have one final interaction with him. This would be the first one that these girls had ever done, but were willing to give it a shot. They gathered up a few things that belonged to him. His watch, his cigar case, a photograph of him when he was younger. They lit some candles, held hands, and began to perform the ritual. Suddenly, the candles flickered, and the air grew thick, and a presence was palpable. The girls clutched their hands tighter and knew that what they were doing was releasing some sort of spirit force. The flames on the candles doubled in size, and just as they did, a low, echoing voice boomed from the center of the room. "Clara, save me." Save you? Why would I have to save you? Clara's mind raced. What was happening to her grandfather? She yelled back, "Save you from what, Grandpa?" "It hurts, Clara. It hurts so much." The voice screamed back through the void. Her anxiety grew. This isn't what she had expected this to be. She started to respond, "What is hurting you?" But she couldn't finish what she was saying because another voice entered into the mix. An even deeper and far more menacing voice than her grandfather's roared from the flames. "His soul is mine and yours will be too." Just then, one of the candles flew directly at Clara's face, grazing her as she was just able to react in time to get out of the way. The girls screamed, let their hands go, retreating to the back of the room, tears streaming down their face. This was enough to end the seance. The candles returned to their normal height. The voices depleted to nothing, and the presence seemingly left. But the picture of her grandfather had burned right as they were retreating and left only ashes behind. Whenever you are performing a ritual where you contact the dead, you always run the risk of interacting with a demon or potentially learning something that you wish that you hadn't. Both things happened to Clara and her friends on that one Halloween.
Number 5, the licked hand. This one's got many names. The licked hand. I always knew it as humans can lick too. The story goes that a girl is staying home alone on Halloween for the first time, with only the family dog to keep her company. While reading the news, she reads a story of an escaped convict the police are looking for and alert the neighborhood to be on the watch for. Naturally, she's terrified, so she decides the safest thing to do will be to lock herself in the house, lock all the doors, turn all the lights off, and spend the night in bed, letting the stress wash over her. She takes the pup to bed with her for comfort, and she drifts off to sleep, but wakes up in the middle of the night, hearing a loud, constant dripping noise coming from the shower. She's scared since she's the only one in the house and she hasn't used it, but chalking it up to just maybe being a leaky faucet, she tries to get back to sleep and offers her hand to her dog, letting it lick her hand to calm her down. The next morning, she wakes up and goes to the bathroom to see what happened, and screams when she discovers the body of her dog hanging from the shower. And written in the mirror in dried blood is the phrase, "Humans can lick too." Classic, absolute classic. It might be Halloween, but we bring you the scares all year round. I'll scare you on Christmas, I don't care. Hit the subscribe button and join us for the best scary stuff on the net at Top 5 Scary. Number 4, poisoned candy. Trick or treat? Well, why not both? This is probably another one of the most recognized urban legends on this list, and inevitably, every single October, some small town will put out an article about it, and people will start to get worried about the fear of someone putting something sinister in your little one's trick-or-treat goodie bag. This legend has gone back pretty much since trick-or-treating has been commonplace, but rose to huge mainstream prominence and myth status around the 70s and 80s, where it's now since become an endlessly reshared, freaky story that happened to a friend of a friend. All kinds of variations on this one pop up, but the most common ones you hear are sadistic pranksters putting razor blades in candy, somehow, or poisoning candy, broken glass, you name it. One very dramatic twist is suggesting that somehow people would poison their kids' candies with illegal narcotics. Something I've always wondered about this particular legend, it always gets passed around, but no one ever stops to question just how much effort this would be. I mean, repackaging the candies, getting them in there. Like, outside of if you went trick-or-treating at maybe Jigsaw's house, I can't really see this happening. And even then, he usually gives you a pretty decent heads up. He has the little puppet explain the game. Now, despite the long-term popularity of this myth, it hasn't actually been proven, not once. A criminology professor from Delaware named Joel Best did a deep dive in 2019 on this phenomenon, studying police reports all the way back to the 1950s and found it remarkably inconclusive, stating that almost every single report of tampered candy comes back to being a hoax or ends up being a cover-up for something else. Besides the point though, as evil as putting a razor blade in an apple would be, giving out an apple already on Halloween is already dangerously delusional behavior, and that should be considered criminal on its own. Number 3, clowns. Please tell me you remember this one. This was like a real problem for a hot minute. 2016 was the first time things were getting very weird. For a while, we were experiencing a record-breaking case of scary clown fever. Between Pennywise terrifying us from ever going near a sewer grate, Jared Leto terrifying us from ever going back to the movies, we were all on edge when it came to rainbow wigs and big shoes. Recent polls of Americans have showed that almost 40% of all Americans say they have a deep fear of clowns. It's understandable. Between the movies and the constant urban myths, clowns get a very bad rap. While North America was coming down bad with coulrophobia, we just could not stop seeing evil clowns everywhere. It became a trend, or plague, maybe more fitting, of people dressing up as their favorite terrifying clowns and just standing around the neighborhood, haunting and scaring anybody who passed them by. Naturally, this made it rife for urban legendary. All manner of stories came out of these sinister clowns abducting people, attacking people, and some truly dark legends saying these clowns were stalking their prey, but we don't know how many of these were actually true. You know, some people even wondered if there was a conspiracy going on involving a shadowy cabal of scary clowns working in tandem to scare people, presumably all driving around in the same little car that fit 30 of them. So what was it? Was it all just viral marketing for a horror movie? A lot of people assumed it had something to do with it, although the studios vehemently denied any connection. It eventually scared people so much that in the United States, some companies like Target stopped selling clown costumes and paraphernalia altogether. Some neighborhoods even instituted bans on clown costumes. Really, actually, they banned clowns, like the town from Footloose banned dancing. In the end, like all trends, it faded off, but that doesn't mean it won't still be in our memories for a long, long time. Number 2, the Bunny Man. Now, I've always been a huge fan of the slasher movies. Michael Myers, Ghostface, Voorhees, there's just something really cool about a big terrifying lunatic running around with a mask and a blade. It's kind of cool because it's the thing that only exists in movies, you know? It's not a real life thing, right? Well, enter the Bunny Man, a real life horror story straight out of your worst B-movie nightmares. The first reported sighting of the Bunny Man was on October 19th, 1970. right before All Hallows Eve. A young couple, an Air Force cadet, one Robert Bennett, and his young wife, were visiting family in Burke, Virginia. They drove down to Guinea Road in Burke, and at around midnight, the couple pulled their car to the side of the road. They say it was to visit an uncle who lived across the street, but I'll just say, yeah, I'm sure that's why you parked on the street in the middle of nowhere at midnight, but that's neither here nor there. What's there is that while the two were sitting in the car, presumably discussing politics and working hard, they heard crashing noises and noticed the front window had been smashed, and on the seats lay a hatchet. They saw something walking towards them, a man wearing all white with long white ears, screaming at them that they were on private property. The couple hoofed it, naturally, and told police exactly what they saw. A tall man in a bunny mask with a hatchet. Now sadly for all of our sleep schedules, this wouldn't be the last time anyone saw the bunny man. Not even 2 weeks later, a security guard, one Paul Phillips, was walking home at night down Guinea Road, where he saw an odd man wearing a bunny mask and a suit sitting on an unfinished porch. The security guard, braver than I would have been, approached the man to see if he needed some help. The bunny man then drew the hatchet he had hidden and began wildly slashing the porch, screaming at Phillips that if he didn't leave, he'd chop his head right off. Now, those two sightings back to back were the most widely documented bunny man sightings, reported to the police, and are most likely actually real. From then on, though, the townsfolk of Burke, Virginia, the bunny man would become an urban myth. Sightings and stories would pass around with all manner of sinister details getting added to Bunny Man's legacy. The truth is, the Bunny Man was never found, and to this day, no one knows who he was, what his deal was, or what manner of darkness he was hiding behind those big floppy ears. And number 1, the decoration. Who doesn't love a haunted house? Nothing like wandering through the dark and having a bored, slightly sadistic teen jump out at you with a scary mask. Sometimes they're pretty scary, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes they're pretty corny, you know? Plastic skeletons and rubber bats aren't that terrifying, right? Well, in 1976, a production crew was filming an episode of The $6 Million Man set in a carnival, and they needed a haunted house background to shoot with, so they went to New Pike Amusement Park in Long Beach. The crew began readjusting the decorations to accommodate all of their equipment, and the team wanted to take down a hanging mummy prop that was blocking a shot. And while the team was moving what they thought to be nothing more than cheap plastic and paper mache, they broke the arm of the dummy and then revealed the human bones inside of it. Yeah. Turns out the dummy mummy was a real embalmed human body. How no one noticed that is beyond me. But just think of that for a second. How many people do you think walked through that exact haunted house without knowing that cheesy little mummy was a real body hanging there with them?
Number 5, Samhain. I wanted to start today out with Samhain because honestly, we wouldn't have the capitalistic and Americanized Halloween we know and love today without its pre-Christian origins. And I'm a big fan of giving credit where credit is due, especially as a gal that considers a love of all things spooky and Halloween a personality trait. Seriously, I had a vampire-themed birthday party this year for a reason. These origins date all the way back to the Celts of ancient Ireland, who celebrated the new year on November 1st. That day marked the transition from the warm, fruitful summer months to the cold and dark winter, a period that was most often associated with, death. So on October 31st, the night before the new year, they celebrated what was known as Samhain, which is one of the 4 festivals of the Celtic year. This was a night when the boundary between the living world and the world of the dead became thin, and ghosts could return to walk the earth. Now, meddlesome ghosts damaged crops and caused trouble, but the blurred line to the spirit world also made it easier for Celtic priests to make predictions about the coming year. People believed they could commune with the dead more easily during that time, lighting bonfires to ward off ill-intentioned spirits, and those fires attracted bugs, which in turn tempted bats to a tasty feast. According to old documents, in its most primitive way, this celebration would have featured many sacrifices to the Celtic gods of death, with both animals and humans thrown into huge fire pits as offerings. Some folks claimed the ancient druids ate their firstborn on this occasion, or collected the life source of their sacrificial humans in cauldrons and drank it. The stories get gorier, claiming that hollowed out pumpkins and turnips would be filled with fat from previous sacrifices and lit. Now, villagers also attended the bonfire ceremonies wearing animal heads and skins, which may be where the tradition of Halloween costumes first came from. In costume, they would go outdoors and make lots of noise in an effort to fool troublesome spirits into thinking that they were one of them or to scare them away. In later years, various folklore tales emerged citing bats as harbingers of death or doom. Specifically in Nova Scotian mythology, a bat settling in a house means a man in the family will die. If it flies around and tries to escape, a woman in the family will perish instead. dead. Fast forward a few centuries, and the festivals that would become Halloween had evolved, which is a gentle way of saying that at least several Christian popes attempted to replace pagan holidays, like Samhain, with their own religious observances. By 1000 AD, All Souls' Day on November 2nd served as a time for the living to pray for the souls of the dead. All Saints' Day, or All Hallows, honored the saints on November 1st. That made October 31st All Hallows' Eve, which later became Halloween. Number 4. Another use for cheese graters. I know I said Halloween traditions at the beginning of today, but since that's a largely Americanized way of celebrating death, allow me to discuss some other festivals for the dead that are similar to the popular holiday. Ognissanti, or All Saints' Day, is celebrated on November 1st, and on the 2nd of November, commonly called I Morti in Italian, is the day dedicated to the dear ones who passed away. According to local folklore, during the night between November 1st and 2nd, the deceased loved ones come back to their homes to bring gifts to young folks. Folk traditions include lighting on windowsills at sunset a lumino, or red candle, and laying a table for the dear ones deceased, who would come and visit and leave young folks confetti and green beans to teach them that they were keeping an eye on them too. Then on November 1st, almost everywhere you can find the first roasted chestnuts of the season for the enjoyment of everybody. Now during the time of celebration, most Sicilian towns are adorned by colorful markets, selling mostly toys and sweets, along with the chestnuts I mentioned a moment ago. In Sardinia, children go from house to house on All Souls' Day, collecting treats of cakes, nuts, and dried fruit in exchange for a prayer for the deceased. And in Emilia-Romagna, the poor are entitled to Carita di Murt, which is charity in the name of the dead, in the form of donated food or money. Now, Italy doesn't celebrate anything without food, and All Souls' Day is no exception. In Sicily, young folks hunt for treats left by loving relatives no longer around. In northern Italy, some people leave their homes empty in case the dead wants to visit, and many Italians set an empty place at the table for people who no longer sit there. So okay, here's the scary tradition I promised. People hide cheese graters on the night of the 1st of November, because in the past, it was said that the dead would come and grate off the feet of those who misbehaved. Similar to America, young folks in Italy tend to get sweets on Halloween, and some of them even have creepy names like Osso di Motu or Bone of the Dead, and honestly that sounds like something I need to try someday. Number 3, thank you Disney. Up until about the year 2000, over in Japan, Halloween was something people would only hear of by learning English or watching TV programs from other countries. But when Tokyo Disneyland got in on the act, people began to sit up and take notice. Look, if there's something Disney does well, it's capitalism. Okay, look, I love them, but it's true. On Halloween Day of 1997, visitors to Disneyland wore costumes to be part of Disney Happy Halloween. Coincidentally, that was the same year I was born. So as a spooky Disney girly, that's a neat little observation. Already enamored with Disneyland, the people of Japan were enchanted by this new idea of Halloween. And what do you know, the event was a total hit in 1997, and the scale of the party increased along with public awareness until Halloween became established as an annual autumn event. The big thing though was that in the year 2000, 400 visitors and Disney characters in costume held a Happy Halloween Twilight Parade in the park. So nowadays, that would be something entirely different, but honestly, I'm having fun mentally picturing Disney characters as Twilight characters. I'm gonna need y'all to tell me in the comments who you think would play Edward. Since then, it has become a popular event with young people who love to dress up as gruesome monsters and pop culture characters. The Kawasaki Parade is one of the most popular Japanese Halloween parades. It even has an international competition where anyone can vote. But the quality of costumes is crazy high. They also have incredibly professional level special effects makeup that goes on. Now, Halloween celebrations burst out into the street in manic zombie runs, flash mobs, and street parties. The most popular of all the festivities are the Halloween trains. On October 31st, the clinical tranquility of Japan's trains is transformed into a frenetic Halloween bash. Now, Halloween trains were kind of already in full swing by the mid-1990s. They weren't only about dressing up, drinking, and in Tokyo's case, shouting the name of the Yamanote line stations, but as seen in some videos on the internet, Silly String was also involved. They were a way for expats, even those coming from countries that don't celebrate Halloween, to have any excuse to get together, have some fun, and cause a ruckus, which honestly sounds kind of scary to me. Number 2, party games. In the 1700s and 1800s, unmarried women performed rituals on Halloween in hopes of finding a husband. Single ladies used to throw apple peels over their shoulders, hoping to see their future husband's initials in the shapes they made where they fell. Imagine having a name that started with like a T. They also competitively bobbed for apples at parties, believing the winner would marry first. And in a ritual that sounds downright creepy, some thought standing in a dark room with a candle in front of a mirror would make their future husband's face appear in the glass. Honestly, the thought of some spirit messing with my future, or having only a piece of the puzzle without the rest, would drive me batty. So I'll pass on these traditions. A long-held custom is the baking and eating of barmbrack, a dense cake loaded with currants, raisins, and candied citrus. It is tradition for bakers at Halloween to mix a ring, small rag, and a coin into barmbrack, and each token signifies a particular fortune for whoever receives it in their piece of cake. Whoever gets the ring will marry or find happiness, whoever gets the rag will join the clergy or have an uncertain financial future, and whoever receives the coin will have a prosperous year. I'll take the coin, Please. Number 1, visiting Frankenstein's castle. In my personal opinion, Halloween isn't Halloween without a visit to a haunted house or attraction. I've been a scare actor since I was in high school. I remember like the one year that I didn't do it was just so weird without that energy in my life. There's nothing like the interaction you get from scaring the tar out of someone in a healthy way. You know, when everyone's adrenaline's pumping, and goodness is it just ever fun. So if you're like me and you love to be spooked on Halloween, then you might like to visit Germany and take part in the tradition of going to the Burg Frankenstein Castle. The well-known castle stands on a 370-meter high spur of the Langenberg and is located southeast of the Darmstadt district of Eberstadt on the territory of the municipality of Muttal. I tried, I promise. It is the northernmost of a series of castles and castle ruins on the western edge of the Odenwald and looks down on the Rhine plain. In 1978, American airmen from the 435th Transportation Squadron started an annual Halloween festival at the castle, which has since become one of the biggest Halloween festivals in all of Europe. Look, I love my local Halloween haunt, but imagine that in an actual haunted Gothic castle? So Frankenstein Castle, or in German, Burg Frankenstein, is, yes, a hilltop castle overlooking the city of Darmstadt and is believed to have been the inspiration for Mary Shelley's 1818 Gothic novel, Frankenstein. Basically, this whole crazy festival consists of people dressed up as various famous monsters from pop culture. It is the perfect type of Halloween party if you love screaming and running away from figures like, ghouls, goblins, vampires. It usually runs between late October and early November, so people who want to go have more than one chance to attend. Also, the castle is home to some very real ghosty personalities that I would love the chance to meet. For example, Conrad Teppel, who was born there in 1673 and returned whenever he ran into trouble elsewhere, which was, not uncommon. To the superstitious population, he was regarded as a witchcraft master who had made a pact with the devil, conducted inhuman experiments in the castle, and was the origin of the Mary Shelley novel. As an internationally renowned ghost hunter claims, the alchemist's ghost still haunts the cemetery of this castle today and disturbs the rest of the dead. At Frankenstein Castle, he is said to be up to mischief between the chapel and the powder tower, and not just on Halloween. So especially during the rough nights between Christmas and January 1st, he often sits on the chapel roof, clattering with his bony bones, loudly lamenting as he searches for the buried entrance to his laboratory. Road trip?
Number 5, King Candy. I'm sure that mostly everyone here loves candy, and I'm sure that everyone has childhood memories of walking through the dim streets on Halloween, seeking out as much candy as they possibly could. Well, this Halloween, I would urge you to share some of your candy. If not, you may meet an icy, chilling fate. This is the curse of King Candy, and ironically, the curse is enforced by a girl, Susie Beckleham. Susie loved candy, so she loved Halloween. She would stuff her face as she walked from house to house, gnawing off crunchy pieces of freezing candy as she greedily stuffed it into her face. Susie would carry many king-sized pillowcases along with her each year, not returning home until every single bag was filled to the brim. But on her last Halloween, on her way home, Susie was met by some old friends. Her friends stole her candy and pushed her to the ground, then tied a pillowcase over her head and left her alone in the cold, dark night. Susie's hands were so numb from the cold that she wasn't even able to untie the pillowcase on her head. She couldn't shout for help because her throat began to freeze closed. The next morning, she was gone. All that was left was a pile of frosted candy wrappers. Every year since, reports of a figure walking through the streets on Halloween night have been common. The figure was described as wearing a pillowcase over its head, humming as though it is trying to ask for help, and leaving a trail of frosty candy wrappers wherever it goes. Many people have been found frozen still, surrounded by candy wrappers, which they swear they didn't eat. When asked what happened, they all confessed that they refused to give away their candy to a strange girl with a pillowcase over her head. Then a chill would run up their spine, and that was the last thing they remembered before waking up frozen. In the weeks later, they all began to act strange. They were filled with an insatiable hunger for just about anything. Candy was their favorite, but if that wasn't available, they would eat whatever was near: wood, dolls, toys, ice, inanimate objects, and in the most serious cases, they even resorted to human flesh. The common consensus suspects that every Halloween, Susie's ghost stalks the streets, searching for candy to fill her insatiable sweet tooth. She approaches homes and silently asks for candy. When she's denied her request, she ensures that they will meet the same fate as her, frozen, filled with a bottomless hunger for eternity. In recent years, people have even begun to place a piece of candy on their porch as a hopeful peace offering to please Susie. Number 4, tears of joy. A lot of people know how saddening it is to be teased or picked on, and they often wish that the person tormenting them would just disappear. Well, the tears of joy curse offers a terrifying solution to those who are victim to extreme torment. It all started with a girl named Joy. Joy was not well liked. She wasn't pretty, smart, funny, or confident. She stood out among her peers and family, who were all conventionally beautiful and sociable, which they reminded Joy of as often as they could, especially Marianne, Joy's younger sister. The only time Joy ever felt, joy was on Halloween. She would spend weeks planning and hand-making her costumes, just in preparation for her favorite holiday. Her 31st Halloween wasn't any different. Joy had made a gorgeous flowing dress and purchased a ridiculously expensive crown set with hundreds of diamonds. On the eve of this Halloween, Joy's sister showed up to her apartment along with 2 of her friends. Marianne wanted to wear Joy's newly made costume, and when Joy refused, Marianne and her friends began to rip it apart, laughing maniacally while Joy screamed in horror. Joy wrestled her lavish crown from her sister and ran into the bathroom teary-eyed. Marianne began pounding on the door, screaming threats and insults at her sister. Joy's sadness tugged at her throat and she began letting out heaving sobs. Marianne laughed, mocking Joy's inflections and emotions. Joy cried for hours, sitting against the door with her hands over her ears, her eyes shut and her head buried in her knees. All she could think was, what I didn't have in beauty, I couldn't even make up in personality. What I didn't have in intelligence, I couldn't even make up in humor. The very emotion I was named for, I hardly even felt. After hours of hysteric crying, the strangest thing happened. Joy began to smile. She smiled while tears sunk into her lips and their salty taste settled on her tongue. She smiled as she realized her eyes were stuck shut from her tears. Then, Joy began to laugh. She laughed while her breaths became heavy. She laughed as puddles of tears formed around her. She laughed as she tore diamonds out of her expensive crown. She laughed as she placed them in her reddened hand, and she laughed as she placed them into her mouth. Joy's last breath was shallow and metallic. Her lungs and air pipe had been torn to shreds by diamonds, but she still smiled. When she was found, her sister said the smile on her face was the first time Joy had ever looked truly joyful. The next Halloween, Marianne was found in her bathroom, laying on the floor unmoving, puddles of tears surrounding her. Her face was stuck in a wide smile, and she had reddened diamonds falling out of her mouth. Since Joy's passing every Halloween, others who had tormented someone consistently have been found in the same horrifying state. Some have even summoned Joy to help them get rid of their tormentor. They stand in a pitch-dark bathroom, closing their eyes and holding a diamond in their hand while they repeat, "Tears of joy, mocking toy. Mary's end, morals bend." When their eyes opened, the diamond had disappeared, and then, on Halloween, their wish would come true. Number 3, growing up, growing down. Have you ever heard the saying, don't grow up too fast? Well, I'm sure you have. It's what adults always tell you when you're young, but no one ever really listens. Well, some don't have a choice, thanks to this curse. Growing up, growing down. Have you ever heard of Benjamin Buttons? Well, this curse is pretty similar, but somehow a lot scarier. The most well-known case is a man named Billy. Billy loved Halloween. He would dress up and trick-or-treat. He would go to parties and wear his costume as long as he possibly could. But this Halloween, Billy had been invited to a party, so he left his apartment at 8 p.m., 30 minutes after the party started. Billy stepped into the elevator and pressed the first floor button, but on his way down, the elevator stopped. The lights went out, and Billy woke up in his bed, but no, it wasn't his bed, but it was? It was his childhood bed. Billy stared at the posters on the wall, the medals he won in Pee-wee sports, and the bin of costumes. Billy had become young again. He assumed he'd just had a crazy dream, and the memories of him growing up were just a weird, long version of it. But as years passed and he went through his life, the strange memories were exact copies of what had already happened. He lived through every single event. When Billy finally reached the memory of his last grown-up Halloween, he stepped into the elevator, and again, Billy woke up in his childhood bed. This cycle repeated over and over, never ending and never changing. Billy tried hundreds of ways to end the cycle. He tried changing small details, making different choices, and avoiding the elevator completely. But without fail, on that Halloween at 8 p.m., he would be suddenly surrounded by darkness and then awaken in his childhood bed. The curse was created by Sarah Clover, a grieving mother who wished to relive her years with her deceased son. She located an ancient well which held an imprisoned demonic entity and asked for her wish to be granted. And hey, it was. The voice in the well granted her wish. She was able to relive all of her time with her son right from his birth. But she discovered discovered that the ending never changed, and she later discovered there was no way to leave the loop. She began to lose her mind as she lived through her son's passing over and over again, overshadowing the previously cherished memories with hatred, regret, and resentment. She eventually went mad and begged the demon of the well for an escape. The demon agreed to let her out of the loop, on the condition that she would release him from his prison. Sarah agreed. She got a rope and lowered it down into the well, but she realized too late that the demon had tricked her. Once he'd climbed to the top of the rope, he grabbed Sarah by her wrist and threw her in, then filled the well with cement and dirt, trapping Sarah completely. Sarah didn't pass away. She lived. She lived through hundreds of years. She lived through wars and dynasties. She sat in the well, alone, her mind slipping even further into the madness with every passing day, year, and millennia. Buildings were built and destroyed above her. Soon, she began to drag people into a loop, hoping that they would find her and beg to escape, and like the demon, she would trick them and trade places. But time and time again, they retained their memories, and eventually, they went mad from living through the same years endlessly, never finding Sarah or even knowing about her, just suffering. So yeah, I'm gonna avoid ancient locations. I don't know exactly where this well is, but I'm certain that I don't want to go anywhere near it. Number 2, Whispering Silence. The curse of Whispering Silence is definitely not a blessing. Have you ever gotten so overwhelmed that your head is full of buzzing thoughts and it's just so loud that you feel like screaming? No? Okay, just me then. Well, imagine that. That's the result of the Whispering Silence curse. In Romania, a woman named Elena was famous for her gift of communicating with the dead. People from far and wide would come to see her, paying massive amounts of money for her services, praising her heightened ability, and one extremely grateful client even made her a gorgeous diamond and amethyst necklace, which she would wear every day. But not everyone was happy. You see, her sister Julia was very jealous of Elena, and she wished to live her life. So, Julia made a plan. While Elena was sleeping, Julia would sneak into her room and pour a corrosive mixture into her throat and ears. She did this for days and weeks, and Elena got sicker and sicker each day. She started to lose her hearing, then her vision, then her voice. Within a week, Elena had lost her sense of hearing and her eyesight. Within a month, Elena lost her voice and taste. Within 2 months, Elena had passed away. Elena had suspected that she was being poisoned, but she trusted her sister, so she never confronted her. Julia began to go to Elena's husband's house, Andre, daily, offering support, cooking, and cleaning. Eventually, Andre invited her to move in, and the two began a romantic relationship, eventually deciding to marry. Julia was living the life she always wanted, her sister's life. Julia decided to wear Elena's wedding dress, paired with Elena's necklace, which she'd been saving for the wedding. On the morning of the wedding, Julia dressed in the white dress, pulled on a pair of lacy gloves, and secured a veil over her face. She grabbed her intricate bouquet of flowers and placed the necklace around her neck. As she walked down the aisle, she started to become faint. Her vision blurred and her ears rang. Her neck burned as her dizzied body fell to the floor. She frantically looked around the grand venue, seeing crowds of people rush towards her. Julia's ears rang so loud she couldn't hear anyone's voice. She ran to her dressing room and rushed to the mirror. She felt a stinging pain on her chest, so she pulled the necklace aside and noticed a red, burning rash had appeared in its shape. Then the ringing stopped. "Hello, Julia. I know what you did." Julia recognized her sister's voice immediately. For the rest of Julia's life, she couldn't hear anything besides her sister's voice. She tried to take the necklace off often, even tried to cut it and melt it, but nothing worked. It was stuck until she took her last breath. The necklace has had hundreds of owners since, each who met a grisly end. Each became deaf, but they heard hundreds of overlapping undead voices inside their head. This one's scary. Not being able to hear anyone except for the angry spirits of past owners of a necklace is so scary. Definitely avoid wearing the jewelry of people you've scorned. Number 1, Mother Dearest and Father Fearest. This curse falls in the genre of body-snatching curses. Every Halloween, it's said that the ghosts of 2 grieving parents now hunt for 2 parents to possess each Halloween. Margot and John Lewitt were well known in their neighborhood. The pair had taken their own lives years before, after their 2 sons went missing while trick-or-treating. Margot and John had blamed themselves, and Margot and John weren't big fans of family outings or commercial holidays, so they told their sons to go trick-or-treating with a group of friends, and that was the last time they saw them. They took their own lives the very next Halloween. Stacy and Mark Hubert moved into the neighborhood 2 months after the Lewitts passed on. They had 2 sons who they loved very much. They were a perfectly happy, perfect family. They would all have family dinners, they would go on hikes and bike rides together every weekend. The neighborhood welcomed the lovely family with open arms. The Huberts fit in perfectly, and they were perfect until suddenly they weren't. On their first Halloween, Stacy and Mark let their sons go trick-or-treating on their own. The sons returned home later that night, finding that their house was empty and that the door was wide open. The two called the police and alerted them that their parents were missing. This was a high-income neighborhood, so obviously the police showed up immediately. Stacy and Mark were found standing in front of the now abandoned Lewitt house, silently staring at the run-down, overgrown property. The police informed them that their sons were waiting for them at home. The pair walked back home and went straight to bed, not even acknowledging their two sons. Days went by without family dinners, weeks went by without hikes or bike rides, and months went by without decorations on the house. Neighbors noticed the startling shift in the Huberts, but when they asked, Mark and Stacy would just stare at them. The pair spent all their time just looking at the Lewitt house. Hours and hours were spent. Every spare moment was dedicated to gazing at the home. Now, I'm sure you've figured out what happened to Mark and Stacy. You see, Mark and Stacy hadn't been themselves because they weren't themselves. They'd been affected by the curse of Mother Dearest and Father Fearest. The ghosts of Margot and John Lewitt would spend their Halloween evenings searching for parents who had not trick-or-treated with their children, and they would punish them for the entire calendar year until the next Halloween. Next Halloween, when they would move on to the next pair of neglectful parents. I mean, they were the ones that let their sons go out alone, so I don't even know. Ghosts aren't rational, I guess. The Lewitt boys have still never been found. Some suspect foul play, while others believe that the cycle began even before the Lewitt family. What do you think?
Number 5, The Haunting of Hill House. Alrighty folks, together let's dive into the unsettling world of Netflix and its array of spine-chilling shows. One that has been a constant source of both intrigue and fear is The Haunting of Hill House. This modern reimagining of Shirley Jackson's classic novel is a masterclass in horror storytelling. The show weaves a narrative between two timelines, following the Crane family's traumatic experiences in the, Hill House, both as young folks and adults. What makes this series truly terrifying isn't just the supernatural occurrences within the mansion's walls, but the deep exploration of family trauma, grief, and the lasting impact of a horrifying event. Director Mike Flanagan employs long one-take shots that create a sense of unease and urgency, making you feel like an invisible observer trapped in the house's horrors. The intricate set design of Hill House is like an eerie character itself, full of hidden details and hidden ghosts that you may not even notice on your first watch. But beyond the atmospheric scares and jump out of your seat moments, this show excels in psychological horror, which is something I love. It's about the ghosts that haunt not only the house but the characters themselves. The family members' individual struggles with their past and the lasting trauma make you question what's real and what's a manifestation of their own fears. The show doesn't rely on cheap thrills. Instead, it builds a pervasive sense of dread that lingers long after the credits roll. It challenges you, the audience, to confront your own fears and past demons, much like the Crane family. As somebody who enjoys psychological horror over slasher or gore any day, this is on my annual Halloween rewatch list for sure. The Haunting of Hill House is not for the faint of heart. It's a harrowing journey into the depths of the human psyche and the supernatural. It raises quite a few unsettling questions about the nature of reality, family, and the enduring impact of traumatic events. Which, trauma builds character. Number 4, Cabinet of Curiosities. I feel like being, curated and created by the iconic Guillermo del Toro should be enough of an endorsement for this work, but if it isn't, allow me to explain why this should be on everyone's rewatch lists. So let's enter the mysterious realm of the Cabinet of Curiosities, a show that's sure to send shivers down your spine. Produced by, none other than the master of the macabre himself, this anthology series invites you to explore a collection of dark and twisted tales. Drawing inspiration from the rich tradition of horror literature, each episode of Cabinet of Curiosities unfolds like a sinister gift waiting to be unwrapped. It's a modern-day carnival of the bizarre, where the line between reality and the supernatural blurs a little bit. The show's format, akin to the opening of one of those mysterious Cabinet of Curiosities from centuries past, sets the stage for a diverse array of stories. From cursed artifacts to eldritch creatures and haunted houses, Cabinet of Curiosities takes you on a roller coaster ride through the eerie and unexplained. One episode, The Companion, explores the sinister side of technology, raising unsettling questions about the boundaries of consciousness and the consequences of our creations. In another, The Amazing Cave Rescue, you'll venture deep underground to witness a chilling rescue mission that defies all logic and reason. But what sets the series apart is its dedication to practical effects and creature design. In today's day and age, where CGI is used more often than not, the use of practical effects is such a refreshing sight to see. Guillermo del Toro's signature blend of the grotesque and beautiful is on full display, immersing you in a world where the uncanny me feels all too real. Cabinet of Curiosities also pays homage to classic horror tropes, while injecting fresh, inventive twists. It draws inspiration from legends, folklore, and real-life mysteries, making every episode a treasure trove of the unexpected. But it's not just the stories that grip you, it's the way they're told. The show's visual style and cinematography are nothing short of stunning. Dark and moody, it's a feast for the eyes that enhances the eerie atmosphere. As one dives deeper into the Cabinet of Curiosities, you'll find that it's not just about the scares, it's about the human condition. It explores our fascination with the unknown, our innate curiosity, and the consequences of meddling with forces beyond our comprehension. In this age of jump scares and predictable horror, the show offers a refreshing and intellectually stimulating experience. It challenges you to ponder the mysteries of existence, the darkness within us all, and the price we pay for seeking answers in the unknown. Number 3, Ratchet. Alrighty, so let's plunge into the dark and psychologically twisted world of Ratchet. This series that it explores the origins of one of cinema's most iconic villains, Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. If you haven't watched the 1975 film yet, please pause me now, watch it, and then come back later. So set in the mid-20th century, Ratchet is a visual and narrative masterpiece that skillfully weaves elements of horror, psychological thriller, and drama into a chilling tapestry. At its core is a story of Mildred Ratched, a nurse with a dark past who manipulates her way into a job at a leading psychiatric hospital, where she becomes embroiled in a web of mystery, intrigue, and malevolence. Sarah Paulson's portrayal of Nurse Ratched is nothing short of mesmerizing. Her nuanced performance brings depth to a character whose sinister nature was merely, hinted at in the original film. She captures the absolute essence of a woman driven by her inner demons and the complexities of her psyche. Look, I could wax poetic about her all day as a performer if you'd let me. She's incredible at portraying all the little nuances of a character, and she's the reason I watched American Horror Story for as long as I did. What sets Ratched apart is its impeccable attention to detail. The show's production design immerses you in a world of mid-century elegance and menace. The hospital itself is a character, with its imposing architecture and shadowy corridors reflecting the darkness that resides within its walls. This series doesn't shy away from gruesome and disturbing imagery, but it employs it artfully to serve the story and not just for funsies. As someone who, once again, isn't into super gruesome stuff, I didn't have to look away as much as I thought I would during this. There's a reason I'll ever watch Terrifier. No. Each episode feels like a descent into madness, with shocking revelations and moral ambiguities that will keep you at the edge of your seat. But once again, Ratched isn't just about cheap thrills and gore. It delves deep into the complexities of the characters. It explores themes of trauma, identity, and the thin line that separates good from, evil. Angel and devil on your shoulders. The supporting cast, including Cynthia Nixon, Judy Davis, and Finn Wittrock, deliver compelling performances that add quite a few layers to the narrative. Ratched masterfully blends historical events also within its fictional narrative. It tackles issues such as the early days of mental health care, queer rights, and the societal norms of the time. These elements ground the story in a disturbing reality that is all too familiar. The series also excels in building tension and suspense. The slow-burning plot allows for quite a bit of character development and very intricate storytelling. As the layers of Nurse Ratched's past are peeled away, you'll find yourself questioning her motives, sympathizing with her, and simultaneously fearing her. In Ratched, the battle between good and evil is not just external, but a constant internal struggle. It invites viewers to explore the darkest recesses of the human psyche and to confront the monsters that lurk within us all. If you're a fan of psychological thrillers with a touch of horror and appreciate impeccable storytelling and production values, Ratched deserves a top spot on your rewatch list. So, dim the lights, prepare for a spine-tingling experience, and enjoy. Number 2, Marianne. So if we were to go through all of Netflix's horror offerings, we'd stumble upon Marianne, a French series that might just redefine your understanding of spine-chilling television. Set in the atmospheric town of Eldon, the story follows Emma Larsemann. I apologize if I got that name wrong, I'm a little tired today, folks. A successful author whose horror novels are fueled by a nightmarish entity named Marianne. When Emma reluctantly returns to her hometown, she discovers that the supernatural horrors she's been writing about for years might be all too real. Marianne distinguishes itself from typical horror fare in several ways. For starters, it's got a relentless focus on psychological terror. So, kind of like some other things that I've mentioned today, you can tell my biases, this one doesn't rely on jump scares and gruesome visuals. It delves into the deeply unsettling territory of psychological horror. It lures you into the minds of its characters, making you question the boundary between reality and Delulu. The character of Marianne herself is a true embodiment of fear. Her eerie, contorted movements and unsettling presence evoke genuine dread. The show's creators masterfully use her as an instrument of terror, lurking in the background or creeping into the darkest corners of the screen when you least expect it. But what truly sets Marianne apart is its exploration of the power of storytelling. It examines the idea that stories, particularly horror stories, have a life of their own. Emma's creations manifest in her reality, blurring the line between fiction and truth. It's a compelling meta-commentary on the influence of horror narratives on our collective collective psyche. The series also boasts an exceptional ensemble cast. Like Victoire Dubois delivers a hauntingly convincing performance as Emma, capturing her descent into madness and desperation. The supporting characters, including Emma's, young friends and family, add depth to the story and showcase the ripple effect of her writing. Marianne also excels in character development. As secrets from the past resurface and old wounds are reopened, you'll find yourself empathizing with characters you once mistrusted, and vice versa. This moral ambiguity adds quite a few layers of complexity to the narrative. And hey, visually, the show doesn't disappoint either. The town exudes a perpetual sense of foreboding, with its fog-covered landscapes and gothic architecture. The cinematography and lighting contribute to the overall atmosphere of dread, enveloping you in a world where terror lurks in the shadows. Ultimately, this is not just a series to watch, it's an experience to endure. It's a relentless descent into the darkest corners of human imagination, where the boundaries between reality and fiction blur into a nightmare, and a stark reminder that the stories we tell can shape our reality in unexpected and terrifying ways. Number 1, Midnight Mass. Alrighty, so this is a Netflix series that blends horror with profound existential questions. Oh dear. From the mind of Mike Flanagan, the creator behind The Haunting of Hill House and Dr. Sleep, this show promises to challenge your beliefs while sending shivers down your spine. Set on Crockett Island, a remote and deeply religious community, Midnight Mass explores faith, miracles, and the unexplainable. Hey, I love it. When a charismatic priest arrives, strange events begin to unfold, turning the island's tight-knit community into a cauldron of fear and uncertainty. One of the show's standout elements is its pacing. It's a slow burn that allows for character development and the gradual unveiling of mysteries. Rather than relying on, jump scares, Midnight Mass creates an atmosphere of dread, making every scene feel like a lingering nightmare. The characters themselves are complex, flawed, and deeply relatable. Once again, you'll find yourself sympathizing with their struggles and questioning their choices. At the center of it all, though, is Father Paul, portrayed with haunting depth by Hamish Linklater. His transformation is a masterclass in character evolution. The show isn't afraid to deep dive into theological and philosophical questions. It challenges the very essence of faith, examining the consequences of blind belief and the nature of miracles. Is it divine intervention, or is there a darker force at play? Visually, Midnight Mass is a work of art. The island's stark and isolated landscapes mirror the isolation of its inhabitants. The cinematography and lighting are used to great effect, creating an otherworldly and unsettling ambiance. And the use of religious symbolism adds layers of meaning to the narrative. But what sets this series apart is its commitment to exploring the human condition. It's not just about supernatural horror, it's about the terror that resides within us all, about the choices we make, consequences we face, and the darkness that can consume us. It's a tale of moral ambiguity where characters grapple with their actions and the price of their beliefs. The show is a thought-provoking meditation on life, death, and the afterlife, an exploration of the thin line between the sacred and the profane. It's a journey into the heart of darkness, both within ourselves and in the world around us.